In this video I just want to pick up on some material that I kind of left for a few days to do with the quotation from Mark Johnson's book Meaning of the Body. And what I was saying in that last video, which I think I titled Capacities, was that this quotation from Johnson is something I'm going to use as a kind of hook to hang a series of ideas on. And the quotation was that meaning and thought emerge from our capacity for perception, object manipulation and bodily movement. And as I said in the last video, I don't want to repeat the whole thing, but what I was saying there that that those three approaches, and they're not completely separate, they're approaches to the same set of ideas. An approach which focuses on perceptions, by which I mean sort of the different sensory engagements that are possible given the bodily senses we have. An approach based on the idea of the object and what one might do with that object, and an approach based on movement through space, plus the fourth one that I included in the last video to do with space itself, an approach to an understanding of meaning and thought which focuses on an imaginary space. Those are the four, as I say, approaches that I'm going to take. And what I wanted to do with this first one is to just pick out what I think is the simplest entry point, which is one to do with the idea of the object. The object. I'm going to spend a few videos, I think, unpacking what I mean by the object, and how that an understanding of what an object is might inform some aspects of how we think and how we produce meaning, and particularly because I wanted to start setting up some ideas to do with how the object features within objective knowledge, which I think I also just alluded to in the last video. So what I'll be doing over the next video, the set of videos, is to look specifically at objects, how we understand real objects in real spaces. It's a kind of eidetic reduction I'll be doing, but considering what the properties of an object is, what the ontology of this thing called an object is. And once I've set that in place, I want to see if I can go back to consider what kinds of inferences, what kind of entailments of that understanding of the ontology of the object, which of those entailments carries over to our understanding of concepts, to our use of the object as a metaphor for ideas particularly, and for thoughts. And what I'll be saying at that point is that many of the abstract concepts that we hold, the abstract ideas that we hold, we are able to do so because we don't imagine them as abstract, we imagine them as concrete, using the same sensory motor mechanisms in our brains and our whole cognitive structures, using the same mechanisms that we use for holding real objects. And I think it's no accident that we use terms like holding an idea, as if we have got this entity that we're containing within our hands. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the ontology of real objects, and contrasting that to a kind of metaphorical ontology of hypothetical objects or imaginary objects. Those imaginary objects being abstract ideas, abstract concepts. Just a few things to put in place before I move into the detailed stuff in future videos. Clearly there are all kinds of different objects. Some objects are containers, some objects are networks, some objects are clouds, and here I'm just talking about real objects. Some objects have surfaces, some objects have interiors and exteriors, some objects have weight, some objects have negative weight and will float. Lots and lots of different characteristics about these objects. And what I'll be saying, I think, or I'll be trying to say, is that many of those characteristics, the shape, whether it's a container or a network or a cloud, the kind of substantive nature of the object, whether it's heavy or light, whether it's hard to the touch or soft to the touch, whether it floats or whether it sinks under the influence of gravity. These kinds of properties of the object are the inferences and entailments which I'll be taking over and seeing how they figure within an imaginary ontology of objects, or an ontology of imaginary objects, or an ontology of concepts, if you like. Okay, so that's something to do with objects. What else about objects? Yeah, what I'll be doing, what I think will be inevitable when I'm talking about objects, is that some of the other characteristics that come out of that quotation from Mark Johnson to do with perception, to do with space, to do with movement, they're inevitably going to come into play. Because as I've kind of tried to imply in previous videos, this whole perceptual motor process is an integrated whole. There is no, I can't think about an object without thinking of the kind of perceptual mechanisms I have in order to engage with that object. And when I'm thinking about perceptual mechanisms, I pretty much have to engage with motor and movement mechanisms, because, as I've said before, perception is as much a motor activity as it is a sensory activity. So these aren't separate, but I'm going to try to, as I say, focus on the different emphases of those as kind of approaches into this integrated area, beginning with this idea of the object. Is there anything else I want to say on that? Yeah, I think that'll do for now. I'm going to build some videos on the back of that initial idea, which I hope will flesh out the example. But through examples, we'll kind of flesh that idea out a little bit better. Okay, thanks very much for your attention.